Listen, can you hear them? The church bells of Santa Croce, striking 7 times across the red-tiled roofs of Florence. It's 1347, and if you were standing in those narrow medieval streets right now, you'd be ankle-deep in coloured water, purple and crimson dye water, splashing out from the textile workshops that made this city rich. And running through those puddles, her worn leather shoes already stained a dozen shades from a dozen previous commissions, is a woman whose name you've probably never heard. Caterina Di Marco, a widow, a seamstress, and though she doesn't know it yet, a revolutionary. But here's the thing about this moment in history that I find absolutely fascinating. Death is coming. The Black Death, the plague that will kill somewhere between 75 and 200 million people, is already crawling along the trade routes from the east. It hasn't reached Florence yet, but the whispers have. And those whispers, they're doing something extraordinary to the economy. The nobles are hoarding gold. They're cancelling commissions. The seamstresses' workshops, and we're talking about an industry that employs thousands of women in this city, are seeing their orders cut in half. So picture Caterina running through these streets. And she's not just running to get somewhere. She's running because 3 children are waiting for her in that workshop behind the old Roman wall. 3 hungry children. And hunger in the medieval world isn't an abstraction. It's not like skipping lunch. It's the kind of hunger that kills. She reaches her workshop, and waiting there is a demand that should be impossible. Lady Benedetta Tornabuoni. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because we're talking about one of the great banking families of Florence wants her wedding trousseau. Not just a wedding dress, a trousseau. 12 gowns, and each gown requires 20 yards of silk with 3,000 hours of handwork. The math is brutal. 18,000 hours of labour. And Lady Tornabuoni wants it done in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Let me put that in perspective. If Caterina worked every single hour of those 6 weeks without sleeping, without eating, without stopping, she'd have about 1,000 hours. She needs 18,000. It's not just difficult, it's mathematically impossible for one person to complete. And here's where the story gets even more interesting, because this isn't just about one woman's financial crisis. This is about a system. The morning light comes through those workshop windows, and Caterina stands there examining this mountain of Byzantine silk. Each bolt, and really take in what I'm about to tell you, each bolt is worth more than a skilled craftsman makes in an entire year. We're talking about fabric that costs more than a small house. Now, the traditional method for working with this silk isn't just a technique, it's a ritual, it's a religious practice. You cut each piece individually. You bless your scissors with holy water. You mark the patterns with chalk that's been blessed by a priest. Then you cut, while saying prayers to Saint Clare, the patron saint of needleworkers. Every single cut is an act of devotion. And here's the terrifying part. One mistake, one slip of the scissors, and you've ruined fabric worth 50 gold florins. That's about 4 months of wages for a skilled labourer, destroyed in 1 second. And Caterina knows, she absolutely knows, that her rival has already set the trap. Margherita della Vigna, another seamstress, has been whispering to the guildmasters. The widow cannot possibly complete this commission, she's saying. It's brilliant, really, in a vicious sort of way. If Caterina refuses the commission, she looks incompetent. If she accepts it and fails, she loses her license to work. Either way, Margherita eliminates a competitor. But then something happens that shows you how innovation actually works in human history. It's rarely this grand philosophical breakthrough in some ivory tower. It's usually someone watching something mundane and seeing it differently. Caterina's youngest daughter, and we don't even know this child's name, which is its own tragedy about how history records things, is playing with parchment scraps. The girl is folding them, stacking them, and then cutting through multiple layers at once to make paper dolls. Kids have probably been doing this for centuries. But Caterina watches her daughter with the intensity of someone whose entire world is about to change. The child cuts through 8 layers simultaneously, 8 identical shapes, created in the time it takes to cut one, and Caterina's hands start to tremble. Not with fear, though she has plenty of reasons to be afraid. They're trembling with possibility, with the recognition of something that should have been obvious, but has been sitting right there, invisible, for generations. That night, while Florence sleeps, she lights candles. Beeswax candles, which are expensive tallow candles, would be cheaper, but they don't give enough light for precision work, and she begins experimenting. Not with the precious silk yet. She's too smart for that. She uses muslin scraps, layering them together, pinning them with a precision that would make a mathematician proud. By dawn, she's done something that should be impossible according to everything her world believes. She's cut 6 identical sleeve pieces in the time it usually takes to cut one. Read that again. 6 pieces, in the time for one. The impossible has become possible. Just like that. Not through magic. Not through divine intervention. Through observation, experimentation, and courage. The same process that will later fuel the scientific revolution is happening right here, in a widow's workshop, with fabric scraps. But here's the dark side of innovation that we don't talk about enough. Katerina knows, she absolutely knows, that if the guild discovers what she's done, she will lose everything. Not just her license. In medieval Florence, going against guild regulations isn't just losing your job. It's exile. It's excommunication. It's having your children marked as the offspring of a heretic. The church, the guild, the entire social order of her world considers the traditional methods sacred law. They've been doing it this way since Charlemagne's time. 500 years of tradition, 500 years of masters teaching apprentices the blessed method. And this widow, standing in her workshop at dawn, surrounded by her experiments, has just committed heresy against all of it. So what does she do next? Would you like me to continue to the next chapter? So, Katerina needs help. Obviously, right? You can't revolutionize an industry alone, especially when that revolution needs to happen in secret, under threat of exile or worse. But here's the problem. Who do you trust with information that could destroy you? The answer comes at dawn, at the communal washing fountains. And if you don't know about medieval washing fountains, let me paint the picture for you. These weren't just places to clean clothes. They were information networks. They were where women gathered every morning, where news traveled faster than any official messenger system, where alliances were formed and broken. The medieval version of social media, if you will, but with actual human connection. Word spreads through whispered conversations. Caterina Di Marco is looking for seamstresses, desperate seamstresses, women willing to risk everything. Now, think about what that means in 1347 Florence. The wool guild, the Arte della Lana, controls every thread, every needle, every aspect of textile production in this city. We're not talking about some loose association of craftspeople. We're talking about an organization with the power to exile you from the city, to confiscate your property, to essentially end your existence as a ricard, a productive member of society. And their production methods, unchanged since Charlemagne's time. 800 years of doing things the same way. That's not just tradition. That's considered sacred law, ordained by God himself through the natural order of things. Innovation equals heresy. It's that simple, and that dangerous. But desperation has a way of making people brave. Katerina finds her first allies, and here's what I find absolutely fascinating about who she recruits. She doesn't find established guild members willing to break the rules. She finds people who are already outside the system, society's edges, the marginalized, the forgotten. First, there's Lucia the Jew. Her family fled from France, probably from one of the expulsions that were happening regularly across medieval Europe. And here's the cruel irony. She's forbidden from joining the guild because of her religion, but she possesses techniques from Paris workshops that Florentine seamstresses have never seen. She has knowledge, she has skill, but the system says she can't use it officially. Then there's Maria. Her husband died in the wool riots, and yes, there were riots over textile production in medieval Florence. People died fighting over labor conditions and wages. Maria has 6 children and fingers that can work magic with fabric. But as a widow without guild connections, she's essentially locked out of the better-paying work. And young Elisabetta, this one really gets me. Brilliant, talented, denied apprenticeship because her father couldn't afford the guild fee. 200 florins. That's about what a skilled craftsman makes in 2 years. The price of admission to economic security was 2 years' wages, paid up front. Think about how many talented people throughout history have been lost because they couldn't afford the entry fee to success. These are Katerina's revolutionaries, not the privileged, not the connected, the desperate and the excluded. They find their workshop in an abandoned scriptorium beneath the Ponte Vecchio. The stone walls are thick enough to muffle sound, which is crucial because they're going to be working through midnight hours. Can you imagine it? The bridge above them, filled with goldsmiths and merchants conducting daylight business, while below, in the shadows, 4 women are dismantling centuries of tradition. Katerina teaches them the forbidden method. Instead of cutting each piece individually, they layer 6 fabrics together. They pin them with special long pins that Katerina has commissioned from metalworkers, and she has to be careful about that too, because asking for unusual tools raises questions. Then they cut all the pieces simultaneously, using scissors sharpened to surgical precision. What traditionally took 18 days now takes 3 days instead of 18. That's not incremental improvement, that's transformation. But, and this is crucial, the technique requires absolute precision. One slip, and you don't ruin one expensive piece, you ruin 6. The risk is multiplied by the same factor as the efficiency. High risk, high reward. The economics of innovation in its purest form. They develop a new language. Hand signals. Silent communication. They work like a surgical team, each understanding her role without words, and they have to, because guild spies prowl the streets. Margherita della Vigna hasn't given up. She knows something is happening. She can see that Lady Tornabuoni's impossible commission is somehow getting done, and she's determined to figure out how. The work becomes a dance. Lucia handles the delicate silk. Her Parisian training means she understands how to layer it without creating wrinkles or tension points. Maria manages the heavy brocades, using her physical strength to maintain even pressure across multiple layers. And Elisabetta? She proves to be gifted at pattern alignment. She can look at 6 layers of fabric and see if they're offset by even a hair's breadth. But it's more than just technique they're sharing in that underground workshop. They're nursing each other's children during long work sessions. They're pooling resources to buy food when commissions run dry. When one woman's child gets sick, the others cover her work. When Maria's landlord threatens eviction, they all contribute to her rent. They're creating something that medieval society isn't supposed to allow. A sisterhood, bound not by family or religion or guild membership, but by shared danger and shared ambition, by the recognition that they're building something new together. And yet, the spiritual weight of what they're doing haunts them. These are religious women. In a world where the church provides the framework for understanding everything from the movement of stars to the proper way to cut cloth, breaking with tradition isn't just practical rebellion, it's spiritual crisis. They confess to Father Francesco, a young priest who hears their confessions with growing amazement. He grants them absolution, but more than that, he secretly marvels at their courage. Here are women who are risking everything not for personal gain alone, but because they recognize that the old ways are no longer adequate for the world they live in. As Lady Tornabuoni's trousseau takes shape with impossible speed, the garments are beautiful. 12 gowns, each one a masterpiece. The cutting method is new, but the sewing? That's all traditional. 42 types of stitches, gold thread from Cyprus, pearls from Venice sewn in patterns matching constellation charts. Every traditional marker of quality is present. But Margherita della Vigna is watching. She's bribing servants. She's following Katerina through the markets. She's piecing together the puzzle, and she's getting close. Because here's the thing about secrets in a medieval city. They can't stay secret forever. The tighter the community, the harder it is to hide anything truly significant. And what Katerina and her allies are doing, it threatens the entire order of their world. The question isn't whether Margherita will discover the truth. The question is, what happens when she does? Would you like me to continue to the next chapter? The Festival of San Giovanni, June 24th. If you know anything about Florence, you know this is the big one. The feast day of the city's patron saint. The entire city pours into the streets. There are processions, there are races. There's the Calcio Storico, that medieval football game that's less sport and more organized riot. It's noise and celebration and distraction, which makes it the perfect moment to strike. Margarita della Vigna has been patient. She's been watching. She's been gathering evidence. And now, with half of Florence drunk on festival wine and the other half distracted by spectacle, she makes her move. She bursts into the secret workshop beneath the Ponte Vecchio with 3 guildmasters and a small crowd of witnesses. And the evidence? It's undeniable. Multiple layers of silk pinned together, identical pieces already cut, stacked neatly, the heretical innovation laid bare for all to see. Can you imagine that moment? Caterina and her allies, caught in the act. The thing they'd feared for months, finally happening. The underground workshop that had felt safe, suddenly exposed to daylight and judgment. Within hours, and medieval justice could move fast when it wanted to. Caterina stands before the full guild assembly in the great hall of Arte della Seta, the Silk Guild. And if you've never seen medieval guild halls, let me describe this one for you. High ceilings, frescoes on the walls depicting the history of silk making stretching back to ancient times, and portraits, dozens of portraits of master craftsmen from 3 centuries, all glaring down at this widow who dares to challenge their methods. Master Bernardo presides. His family has controlled the Silk Guild for 5 generations. 5 generations of accumulated power and wealth built on the existing system. And he's not about to let some desperate widow tear it down. His speech is something to behold. He doesn't just call Caterina's innovation wrong, he calls it an insult to God's order. He compares her to Eve reaching for forbidden fruit. Think about that comparison for a second. He's not saying she made a mistake or broke a rule. He's saying she committed the original sin. That's the level of rhetoric we're dealing with here. And it's not just hyperbole. In the medieval worldview, the social order who can do what, how things should be made, the proper relationship between master and apprentice, all of that is seen as divinely ordained. Challenging the way things have always been done isn't just innovation. It's challenging God's plan for human society. The assembled guild members nod along. Many of them genuinely believe this. Others simply recognize that change threatens their comfortable positions. Either way, it looks bad for Caterina. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because Caterina has prepared for this moment. She's not just going to defend herself, she's going to transform this trial into theatre. She brings forth Lady Tornabuoni's completed trousseau, all 12 gowns, and the gasps that echo through that hall? They're genuine. These garments are beautiful, not just competently made, beautiful. Each gown bears every traditional marker of quality. 42 types of stitches, not 41, not 43. The exact traditional number. Gold thread from Cyprus, the finest available. Pearls from Venice sewn in patterns matching constellation charts, because wealthy medieval people believed celestial harmony should be reflected in clothing. Caterina demonstrates piece by piece that her method changes only the cutting, the sacred sewing, unchanged, the traditional patterns, preserved, the prayers and blessings, all performed exactly as prescribed. She's not destroying tradition, she's making it more efficient, but the master stroke, the political move that shifts the entire landscape, she reveals letters from noble patrons, and not just any nobles. The Medici bank's matriarch, Contessina de' Bardi, a woman whose family basically owns Florence's economy. The letters are polite, but their message is crystal clear. If the guild suppresses innovations that benefit the nobility will withdraw their commissions from Florence. They'll take their business to Venice, or Milan, or anywhere that can deliver quality work faster and cheaper. You can see the calculation happening in real time on the guild masters' faces. Principles versus profit, tradition versus survival. What good is preserving the old ways if it means economic ruin? And then the younger guild members start speaking up. Apprentice Giovanni and I love this detail stands and declares that Venice is already experimenting with new methods. That Florence risks falling behind in the textile trade that creates 60% of the city's wealth. 60%. More than half the city's economy depends on textiles. And here's this widow, showing them how to do it better. And the guild's instinct is to punish her for it? The debate rages through the night. All night. These men, and they're all men except for Caterina, arguing about tradition versus innovation, divine order versus economic necessity, principle versus pragmatism. It's every debate about technological change that has ever happened or will ever happen, playing out in a medieval guild hall in 1347. Katerina stands silent through all of it, because she's smart enough to know that once she's made her case, talking more won't help. She's set the pieces in motion. Now she has to let them play out. Dawn comes, the debate continues, and then the great doors of the guild hall open. Duke Alessandro himself enters, Duke Alessandro de' Medici, the ruler of Florence. Now, dukes don't just show up to guild trials. This is unprecedented. But Contessina de' Bardi has secretly informed him of the situation, and Alessandro understands something that Master Bernardo and his traditionalists don't. Florence didn't become rich by accident. The city rose to greatness through innovation, banking innovations that let them move money across Europe without physically transporting gold, trade innovations that made their merchants indispensable, political innovations that created a republic however flawed instead of a traditional monarchy. The Duke's speech is brief but devastating. Florence rose through innovation in banking and trade. It will not fall behind in craftsmanship. The guild must adapt or be replaced. Let that sink in. He's not suggesting. He's not requesting. He's telling them that if they can't evolve, he'll dissolve the guild and create a new one that can. Master Bernardo, defeated, has no choice. But here's where the story gets really interesting. He doesn't just pardon Katerina. He can't. The Duke has made it clear that would be insufficient. Instead, he grants her recognition. Official recognition. She will teach her method to any guild member who wishes to learn. Though, and this is crucial, none can be forced to abandon tradition. The old ways remain available for those who want them. But the new way is now legitimate, protected, officially sanctioned. Katerina has won. But more than that, she's changed the rules. She's proven that one desperate widow with a good idea and the courage to pursue it can transform an entire industry. But what happens next? When innovation is unleashed, when the old certainties crumble, what fills the void? Would you like me to continue to the next chapter? 2 years. That's all it takes. Within 2 years of her trial, Katerina's workshop grows from 4 desperate women working in secret to 40 skilled artisans occupying an entire building near Santa Maria Novella. And this isn't just any building. Duke Alessandro has granted it to her personally, in recognition of the tax revenue her innovation generates. Let me repeat that. Tax revenue. The Duke isn't supporting Katerina out of the goodness of his heart. He's supporting her because innovation makes money, and money funds governments. It's one of those beautiful moments in history where moral courage and economic incentive align perfectly. But here's what really fascinates me about what happens next. The technique spreads. Not through official channels or guild proclamations or royal decrees. It spreads along trade routes like seeds on wind. Merchants' wives learn the method when they visit Florence. They see the impossible productivity of Katerina's workshop, and when they go home to Paris, London, Prague, they take that knowledge with them. In Burgundy, seamstresses adapt it for elaborate court fashions that require hundreds of yards of fabric. The Burgundian court, one of the wealthiest in Europe, is famous for clothing so complex it takes teams of workers to create. Katerina's method makes the impossible merely difficult. In Vienna, military contractors realize they can use the technique for rapid production of uniforms. Think about what that means for medieval warfare. Armies traditionally had to wait months for equipment. Now that timeline is cut to weeks. The strategic implications are enormous. The technique flows across Europe, adapting to local conditions, local needs, local fabrics. And within a generation, just one generation, it stops being called the Florence method or Katerina's innovation. It just becomes standard practice. The revolutionary origin forgotten. The way it's always been done. That's how most innovations work, isn't it? They seem impossible. Then they seem radical. Then they seem obvious. And finally, they become invisible, just part of the background of how the world works. But then, in 1348, just 1 year after Katerina's trial, death arrives. The Black Death, the plague that I mentioned at the very beginning of this story. It sweeps through Florence like fire through dry grass. 1/3 of the city's population dies. 1/3. Imagine losing 1 out of every 3 people you know in the span of months. The textile industry is devastated. Workshops close. Master craftsmen die along with their apprentices. Centuries of accumulated knowledge vanish in weeks. It's a catastrophe on a scale that's hard for us to fully comprehend. But Katerina's efficient method means that surviving seamstresses can meet demand despite reduced numbers. It's not a happy story. Nothing about the Black Death is happy. But it's a story about resilience, about how innovation, once established, helps communities survive crisis. And Katerina's workshop becomes something more than just a place to make clothes. It becomes a refuge. Orphaned girls, and there are so many orphans after the plague, come to learn trade skills. They learn not just sewing but mathematics for measuring fabric, literacy for recording orders, basic business skills for managing commissions. Widows find economic independence. The rigid social hierarchies of medieval life soften within what Katerina calls the democracy of shared labour. She establishes the first written training manual for seamstresses. Illustrated with detailed drawings, this is remarkable for several reasons. First, most craft knowledge is transmitted orally, master to apprentice, jealously guarded as trade secrets. Second, women's work is rarely documented in writing. It's considered beneath the notice of scholars. Third, creating an illustrated manual requires literacy and access to scribes and artists, resources usually reserved for religious texts or noble commissions. But Katerina understands something profound. Knowledge that exists only in human memory dies with those humans. Knowledge written down can survive plague, fire, flood. It can travel distances. It can be improved upon by people you'll never meet. The manual spreads literacy alongside craft knowledge. Young women learn to read so they can follow the instructions. Some of them start writing their own notes, their own improvements, their own observations. Information networks that barely existed before begin to flourish. Even the church, initially suspicious of Katerina's innovation, embraces the method when convents realize they can produce vestments and altar cloths more efficiently. The increased production means more items to sell, which means more funding for charitable works, feeding the poor, caring for the sick, supporting orphanages, profit and piety, working together. It's a very medieval combination. As Katerina ages, she's surrounded by granddaughters who will never know a world where women couldn't own workshops, who will never understand that their grandmother's life was extraordinary because they take their own opportunities for granted. That's the gift of revolution, isn't it? The next generation doesn't remember that things were ever different. She reflects on transformation. Her simple innovation, born from desperation and a child's paper dolls, has revolutionized not just garment making, but the very concept of craft tradition. The seasonal fashion collections now possible have created new forms of social expression. Nobles compete not just through the quality of their clothing, but through novelty. The Renaissance idea that individuals can express themselves through appearance choices, that starts here, with innovations like Katerina's that make variety economically feasible. The workshop system she pioneered becomes the foundation for what will eventually become the Renaissance's great artistic workshops. Think about Verrocchio's workshop, where Leonardo da Vinci learned, or Ghiberti's workshop that created the bronze doors of the Florence Baptistery. These aren't just one master and a few apprentices. They're large operations, with specialized workers, efficient production methods, and the ability to take on massive commissions. Katerina's model applied to art instead of textiles. On her 70th birthday, and 70 is a remarkable age in medieval times, especially after surviving the plague. The guild she once faced in trial makes her an honorary grandmaster, the first woman ever granted such recognition. Men who once called her a heretic now stand to honor her achievements. It's vindication, but I wonder if she cares about that by this point. She's seen her innovation transform an industry. She's trained hundreds of women. She's helped her city survive catastrophe. She's proven that courage and intelligence matter more than tradition and privilege. She dies peacefully in 1394. She's seen the 14th century almost to its end. Her funeral is attended by over 1,000 seamstresses. 1,000, each wearing a piece of gold thread in their hair. A tribute to the woman who proved that innovation and tradition could dance together like needle and thread, creating something stronger than either alone. And here's the thing that gets me, the thing that makes this story matter beyond just one woman in one city 700 years ago. Caterina Di Marco's name isn't famous. Most people have never heard of her. She didn't paint the Sistine Chapel, or write the Divine Comedy, or discover America. She found a better way to cut fabric. But her innovation touched millions of lives. It changed how people dressed, how armies were equipped, how women earned livelihoods. It demonstrated that transformation could come from unexpected places, that the desperate and marginalized, given opportunity, could reshape the world. The next time you put on clothing, think about the thousands of innovations that made it possible. The spinning techniques, the weaving methods, the cutting patterns, the sewing machines that would come centuries later, each one built on foundations laid by people whose names we've forgotten. Caterina Di Marco deserves to be remembered. Not because she was perfect, we don't know enough about her life to make that judgment, but because she represents something essential about human progress. That courage matters, that observation matters, that when the old ways no longer serve us, someone has to be brave enough to try something new, even if it means risking everything, especially if it means risking everything, because that's how the world changes. Not through grand pronouncements or royal decrees, but through desperate widows watching their children play, seeing possibility in paper dolls, and having the courage to say, there must be a better way, and then finding it.